a great joy and privilege to be here, and I am very thankful to your rector and to Bishop Hanley for their invitation to do this today. Do you remember The Once and Future King? It's something of a retelling of King Arthur's story, his relationship with Merlin, and discovering what his role in life is going to be. The title comes from what was supposedly carved on King Arthur's tomb. Here lies Arthur, king once and king yet to be. The story of Arthur is a medieval echo of the readings that we just heard. The Middle Ages were a time of violent conflict and plague and despair. And Arthur's story speaks into that scenario of gloom and doom. Our current landscape has parallels. ISIS and its terrorist violence, Ebola sprung up again in Liberia, the hatred and loathing of immigrants and political candidates, and an obscene and growing economic inequality. The great story of God's love of humanity gets retold over and over again in every age, especially when people are yearning for help and hope. Think about the great Star Wars cycle, and Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter. They're more recent versions of that ancient story of human hunger to see goodness overcome the evil of this world. We don't have many kings left in this world, and those who remain have relatively little real power left. Yet the biblical image of a king, a good king, still speaks into that sense of despair. A good king in biblical times was thought of as something not unlike a cosmic Sicilian godfather, a fixer, a healer, one who sets the table and provides a feast for the whole crazy family. The violent undoing of enemies was not so foreign to some of them either. David is held up as the paradigm of a good king, in spite of his infidelities, because he wakes up to his error and turns around. He repents and goes in a new and more godly direction, when he's reminded of his responsibilities as a shepherd to care for all the sheep, to see that they're fed and watered, healed, and delivered from danger. And for Israel, David becomes a timeless image of an earthly king. Yet the earthly king can ever and only be a pale shadow of the one who has made all the kings and peoples of this earth. Valiant and valued earthly leaders are those who act like God does. And Jesus shows us what that looks like. To call Jesus king is to claim fealty, loyalty to that once and future king. When Pilate interrogates him about the challenge to Pilate's authority, Jesus answers that he's not a king like Pilate or the kings of the countries around him. If he has a royal role, it's to speak truth. And then people who are seeking truth will certainly pay attention. The contrast is immense. Earthly kings and rulers demand loyalty. Jesus simply speaks and acts truthfully, and people who discern the truth follow him. The new order is an invitation to love one another, not a demand backed by threats of death and punishment. The truth of King Jesus is being born in a cave to parents on the road. His truth is being part of a family who flee to Egypt as refugees when the local king threatens them. His truth as an adult is living on the road with no place to lay his head. His scepter is a green branch of palm, and his true throne is a place to let go of his life. This king sits in the dirt with his subjects. He goes fishing and endures storms with them. He's beaten and tortured and dies with them. His rule is about more abundant life that comes through love that transcends death and the grave. What does it mean to be a subject of such a king? What is a subject? The word comes from roots that mean to be thrown under, like being thrown under the bus. Yet Jesus invites us to be subjects in the grammatical sense, to be the subject of a life's sentence, as one who acts. We're meant to be people who do love in the world around us. We're meant to be subject to love itself in a way that turns us into active doers and lovers and practitioners of love. The subjects of King Jesus, sent into the world by love himself, are meant to become love ourselves. It's that real possibility that we celebrate today. The royal possibility that ultimately love rules as the once and future hope of all creation. I saw that love in action this week, even in the aftermath of Paris. The people of Stockholm have been working to assist the refugees that have been flooding into Sweden, thousands of them every day, until just recently. The move in Stockholm started with a Facebook page inviting people to help those refugees. Volunteers showed up at the train station to meet migrants from Afghanistan and Syria, from Iraq and Somalia, Eritrea, and beyond. They brought winter clothing, food, and water. Congregations began to organize a coherent response. We visited a Church of Sweden parish that houses migrants for a night and feeds them breakfast before they go on to seek refuge in Finland and Norway. The parish welcomes people who've been met by others at the train station and brought to a mosque a block away, where they're offered showers and a meal. The Islamic Relief Society in Sweden has the necessary language skills and cultural awareness to lead the triage work, to figure out where people are coming from and where they're trying to go, and to connect them to the resources they need. Sweden offers Syrians immediate residency. Children who travel alone go to shelters. People who want to go on to another country are sheltered for a night or two in this Lutheran parish up the street. Yes, some people are afraid, and the nationalist politicians are making loud complaints. One might expect even more fear-mongering in a nation that until recently has been very homogeneous. Yet when Sweden began to accept refugees after the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, some 30,000 a year, they also began to be intentional about incorporating new Swedes into the wider society. Several people told me that hearing the stories of Swedes who had emigrated over the last 150 years, mostly for economic reasons, hearing those stories has helped them begin to recognize the gift that they could offer to others. And the Lutherans went on to say that they are discovering God anew in those who are coming to Sweden. Why is our own nation, born of immigration, having such a hard time remembering our origins or seeing new neighbors as God's beloved? We got to see love in action in the midst of Katarina Parish and its partnership with the Islamic Center. The Muslims involved would say that it's their duty as subjects of Allah The Christians would say that it's how they follow Jesus. Both would acknowledge that it is simply recognizing, respecting, and loving the neighbors that God has given them. What we're going to do in a few minutes is ultimately about claiming our identity as love in the world. We're going to remind ourselves that we are subjects of Jesus, actors and doers of love in the world, and that love ultimately overcomes our fear. We baptize in the hope that infants and adults alike will continue to grow into that loving possibility. The promises that will be made on Lillian's behalf, and the promises we renew by saying, I will with God's help, are about claiming the hope that loving neighbors as ourselves can change this world. Living as an actor of love in the world is what we have chosen in life, what we've said yes to. It's a whole lot easier to do it together, for love always makes more of itself. And we recognize that in the hope a baby represents. We come together like this literally to remember and to strengthen the body for the work of love in the world. But we can't stay here. We must go out to be love in the world. Each neighbor we meet presents a possibility for Jesus' subjects to overcome their fear and to generate more love in the world. And the reign of God comes a little closer to reality here on earth. The subjects of the once and future King Jesus bring his kingdom nearer by being and doing love. So come and remember how deeply loved you are and have been, and go and be love with every fiber of your being. And together we will find a world where love itself overcomes fear to reign supreme. Yesterday, today, and into the future, forever.